Also confirming that media statement we saw earlier that the SANDF has been deployed and that the Crime Intelligence Unit will be giving an update on the way forward, particularly tomorrow or so. We do have Johan Burger from the Institute for Security Studies joining us for reaction. Johan, thanks for your time. We appreciate it. What do you make of the President's address? Was it enough? Johan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great. What do you make of the President's address? Did he say enough? Is government doing enough to see an end to this violence and looting?
Yes, I think he said what was necessary to say. I don't think there's much else he could say. The focus now is two main issues. The one is calling on the public of South Africa to understand that we have embarked on this process of renewal, fighting back against the high levels of corruption and so on, and then speaking directly about the public violence that we are seeing as well as the looting that's taking place. Calling on the security forces, the deployment of the military in support of the police, as well as the intelligence community to provide the necessary intelligence. And all of this will be focused in the high crime areas highly affected by public violence and looting. So, so I think this is about what the President would be able to say at this stage. And of course, he's also mentioned the fact that he is chairing the National Command Council and that they will meet twice daily, twice every day, to evaluate the situation, to monitor the situation, to give direction, and to ensure that everybody does what is expected of them. So with that kind of control by the President and other senior cabinet ministers and state officials, I think we should be able to get on top of the situation.
You know, why are we not on top of the situation right now? Why are we still meeting tomorrow to come up with solutions? What is happening with crime intelligence, state security? We're not seeing police being strategic with these people just yet. So the President's words right now is him talking about what's going to happen. Why is it not happening, especially with these live visuals we're seeing of looting continuing? The lawlessness continues in this country at this hour.
Yes, absolutely right. I think what the President announced should have been announced far earlier than this evening. And I think there are a number of reasons why this is the case. Our intelligence agencies have not been providing the kind of intelligence that we needed to preempt the situation, to plan and put operations in place that could have taken out those who's behind the planning of the violence. And they could have deployed a far greater number of police and the military if they were deployed earlier in the areas where this kind of violence was expected. So, there was a huge amount of neglect, and I think that neglect is largely due to the absence of good and timely intelligence. So, I would blame our intelligence agencies for not being able to produce the kind of preemptive intelligence that we needed. But we are now in this situation, and we have to do the best we can now. Although this is late, I don't think it's too late. But it's still, we shouldn't have found ourselves in this situation.
And let's talk about the role of the SANDF, which the President mentioned now for the first time, but we saw the statement released earlier. They're there to support the SAPS and obviously heavily rely on the movements of the SAPS. Is that what we're going to see from the SANDF going forward? Because it doesn't seem like they're doing much right now.
Yeah, well, if I look at the press release by the SANDF earlier today, they made it very, very clear that at this stage Their role will be a support role to the police. The objective will be to provide protection to the law enforcement agencies while they perform their law enforcement duties. So I think the military sees their role as largely protecting or protective of the law enforcement agencies. But I think at the same time, their presence in itself would contribute to very, very largely to a sort of a deterrent situation. And, you know, it's just a question that the military, simply by their presence, creates some sort of deterrent. And we saw during the lockdown last year and the research that we've done with the police that the public has, if not respect, then at least much more fear of the military, even where the military is simply just present and not doing anything. So I think more than providing a protective umbrella to the police and other law enforcement agencies, I think their presence will contribute to deterrence as well as reassuring the public in those areas that are so badly affected by public violence and looting at this time.
The word contribute to it being a deterrent is key here, Johan, isn't it? Because even though we saw those officers in Pietermaritzburg, which we saw live for the first time on ENCA, and parts of Gauteng, they were still looting. People were openly putting televisions into their cars, yet the army was down the road from where they were. So, you know, how much of a deterrent is it? Because it doesn't seem to be working. If I had to draw an assessment from today, seeing the army out and police officers, it didn't seem like it did much to deter people. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yes, I think you're right, but I think the problem was because this was not expected. The military are also not fully deployed yet. That there's a process of deployment. As far as the police are concerned, I think the problem for them was that they arrived at some of these scenes in far too small numbers. You know, 2 or 3 police vehicles. You cannot expect them to act against a crowd of hundreds of people, and in some cases looks like thousands of people carrying away stuff. The danger is if the police try to intervene in small numbers, they would either then themselves be attacked by the large groups of those involved in looting and other forms of public violence. And the alternative here is that the police then react by believing that they are threatened by violence against themselves, and they might resort to the use of firearms. And you know, nobody wants to see that kind of situation developing. So I think what the police do, whether we agree with it or not, I think their sense is that if they are not deployed in big enough numbers, large enough numbers, then they simply do not intervene. And I think the idea now is that they understand that they need to deploy, they need to concentrate their forces in particular areas. They cannot be everywhere at the same time. So choose the hotspot areas where they will maximize their presence. And then the military will provide the necessary protection so that the police can carry out their mandate. I think this is perhaps the more acceptable approach. We haven't seen it so far, but I think the deployment of the military at this stage is to hopefully to ensure that the police operationalize themselves in this way.
Yeah, it's a very worrying situation, and the question is whether what's being done is going to be enough. Thank you so much for your insight. We appreciate it. Johan Burger is from the Institute for Security Studies.